You know, we hear that, especially around election time, that there aren't a lot of great leaders, that it's more or less process of elimination. Not certainly in politics. What about in business? What does it take to be a leader? Businesses need to have the right employees who are willing and ready to step up and take charge and keep going. How do businesses build up those people? To talk more about all of this, Audie McCarthy is with us, the president and CEO of Mohawk College Enterprise, and is with us now. Good afternoon, Audie. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Good. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. Talk about Mohawk College's Enterprise Future Ready Leadership Program.
I'd love to. It's a program that we developed in about 2011, and it's an 8-day program. It runs over 8 months, though, so we offer the training 1 day a month over a course of 8 months, and that allows the participants to go back to their jobs and practice, in between the sessions as well. So it's a program, again, that we offer to any sector within in the communities, whether it's municipal, whether it's manufacturing, healthcare. We cover it all.
Who would be interested in this program?
Actually, anyone who's in leadership, or particularly emerging leaders, so people who are new to a leadership role, or in some cases what happens is, as part of succession planning, the managers will look to their employees and say, who are the shining stars, who are the people that we think are going to move into leadership positions in the future. So it could really be a combination. We've also had a number of people who have been in management roles for many, many years, but never had any formal training, so they're interested in participating as well.
What makes a good manager a good leader?
There's a difference, first of all, between a manager and a leader.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference really is in the level of task versus inspiration. So in terms of a manager is the one who performs the tasks, makes sure things that get done, very results focused, not that leaders aren't, but very specifically working on tasks, development, that type of thing. Whereas a leader really is a coach, a mentor, a person that inspires others, much more looks much more out into the future. So certainly a longer visionary. So that's how we define the difference between the two. So really what we focus on is understanding the basic management skills, but most importantly is how do you transfer that to your teams so that your teams become successful.
Does a great employee make a great leader? In other words, depending upon what your industry is, if you're just a guru of your industry, you know everything, you're an innovator, you're a visionary, does that necessarily mean you're a good leader of people?
No, it doesn't. And that's what happens in a lot of organizations, that people get promoted because they're really good at the job they do. And without some additional training and without some additional opportunities, coaching, etc., sometimes they don't move out of that role, which makes it very challenging for them because it's hard for them to break away from doing the job as opposed to the coaching and the mentoring and getting others to do the job.
When you're a student, or do you find many students who aspire to be leaders, or do they aspire to be in a certain industry, and then, as you mentioned before, you go make your way up the ladder, and then you eventually find yourself in those positions?
I think it's a combination of both. There's so many different reasons why people get into the roles and get into the jobs and companies that they want to. Certainly there's a level of student who, once they graduate, is just looking to get into that industry or just looking to get a job. And then often it depends on who they end up working for, so who their leaders are, and are their leaders encouraging them? Are their leaders someone that they inspire to be like and learn from? So it really is, I don't think it's not one way or the other, Scott. I think it's really just very dependent on the individuals and where they end up in terms of getting a job or a position with an organization.
Are you a born leader, or is it a skill you can develop?
I think it's both. I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I've certainly seen, and I'm sure you have as well, like youth who stand out and are leaders and seem to be natural leaders. I do think when it comes to industry or when it comes to working in municipalities, it's a combination of both. I think you have to have whether it's a personality or whether it's the emotional intelligence level to want to do it, for one thing. And then I think that, leaders can always get better and better. So whether you're a born leader or not, you still need to have the skill development and the opportunities and the coaching and the mentorship to make you become, or to allow you to become, rather, the best leader that you can possibly be.
When you think it, isn't leadership one of the best transferable skills? Because that, is something you can take to various organizations.
Absolutely. And, you don't have to have that title to be a leader either. And I think that's where some people get, whether it's intimidated or a little bit lost in the whole concept of leadership, is within any organization, there's lots of people that are leaders but don't have the official title. So it really is about that drive to move things forward, to help others, to work with other people as well. How
does a person get into the head? Obviously, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. Obviously, industry is very competitive, especially for young people who are coming out. Everybody's trying to get ahead. Everybody's trying to get themselves ahead. How does a leader separate that and concentrate more on their people? Because as you mentioned, leader, manager, two totally different things. Leader more like a coach, just great at getting the best out of people. How does a leader step back and put the people first?
And, that's one of the biggest challenges, and it's a challenge that we face all the time when we're working with people who are going through these programs, is the letting go of the day-to-day, the ability to trust the people that work for you and with you and allow them to sometimes even make mistakes, because that's how they're going to learn. So it really is a challenge, and it really requires a lot of focus and discipline and time management. You have to build time in your schedule, in your calendars every week to sit down and talk to your people, or if your people are remote and, not necessarily in an office environment, to make the time to connect with them, whether it's by phone, whether it's face-to-face or whatever. And really what you find is when leaders can get into a pattern of doing that, then a lot of the day-to-day stuff, if you will, goes away because their people are now more equipped and better trained in order to handle that, and better motivated in order to try and make a difference as well within the organization. But absolutely, that is one of the biggest challenges that leaders face today, because there's less and less resources, there's less and less people around to help you meet your goals, and it's a huge challenge for leaders. But it's a matter of discipline and saying, I understand the value, I recognize the value in coaching my people and mentoring my people, and if I make time to do that and I plan that on a weekly, monthly basis, then that in fact will help me move the organization ahead.
How do you balance that? Because obviously, as you said, the leader, the manager, whatever you want to call him, he sees all people. He or she sees all people. They know everyone's personality, hopefully better than anyone else who are employees. At what point do you draw the line, or how do you balance? I don't have any more time to spend with Jim on whatever. I got to worry about my job and moving the company forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the more often you do it, and the more it becomes a part of your day-to-day leadership style, the easier it actually gets to do that balance. Because your employees can be very forgiving as well. If you have to change something because you've all of a sudden got whether it's a client meeting or whether your boss needs to talk to you, your employees are very understanding of that. So it helps in that balance act. The more that you put yourself out there for them, the more they're going to put themselves out for you. So if there is an opportunity or if there's a challenge that comes down, you're going to get that support from your employees as well. It absolutely is it's a two-way street, absolutely.
Does everyone have a leader in them?
No. I would say no. There are some people who would never want to lead, and so self-determine that as well. But there are some people that can go through programs and can go through coaching and mentoring, and for some reasons just, either, again, deselect and decide they don't really want that role or that level of responsibility. And I think there's always some people in every organization that, would not necessarily be what we would call leadership quality or whatever, and it doesn't mean that they're not a very valuable resource to the organization, because we can't have all leaders in an organization either. There has to be that balance within teams, too.
How does a good leader motivate people to get them to do what they want them to do?
Well, I think it's partially is, again, going back to sort of emotional intelligence, understanding your people, Everyone is motivated differently, so understanding what motivates individuals, understanding, first of all, it actually goes right back to the hiring process as well. You know, when you have a hiring process, when you're building your team, you really need to build that balance between the members of your team. And again, knowing them individually, getting to know them a little bit on the personal side as well. You know, it doesn't have to be all business. Having lunch with people, you know, you find out all these types of things about the individuals, and then, you know, and ask, you know, bottom line is ask them, you know, what can I do to make your job easier? What can I do to help you love this job, to help you want to do better in your role as well? So that open communication, open dialogue is critical.
Does a good leader ask more questions than they do sort of preach?
Absolutely, and you know, it's really hard sometimes because people think of a leader, they think of almost like a teaching role where you sit there, you talk, we do what you say. Exactly. Yeah, and you know what, but it's hard because sometimes, you know, especially if a leader's gone through the ranks and if the leader knows the job inside out that their employees are doing, it's really hard sometimes to take that step back and be the coach and not be the one who's just supplying the answers. So that in itself is something that leaders, I think, have to be careful of as well because, again, your whole job is to get the job done through others. You know, get the work done through other people on your team and work with those people so that they can improve, you know, whether it's personally, professionally, their skill set, all of those types of things. So it's a tough job being a leader. It's hard sometimes to make everybody happy. Sometimes you can't make everybody happy, but you have to hope that you've built that trust and respect and mutual accountability that people understand when things don't go necessarily the way people want them to.
How does a good leader nurture other leaders without feeling threatened by them?
I think it goes again back to trust, back to having a relationship. The building of relationships is critical, whether it's a leader-employee relationship, whether it's peer-to-peer relationship, or whether it's customer to or rather client relationships as well. It all stems down, to me, it boils down to being able to build solid, mutually beneficial relationships where there is that trust, where there is that open communication. So if I want to go to my peer and say, hey, I'm not sure you handle that correctly, can we sit down and talk to you about it? They're not going to be offended by it. And likewise, I can go to my peers and say, not sure I'm handling this correctly, or do you have any ideas how I should look at this situation differently? And have those, once again, it's communication.
Does a good leader need to have a really strong personality, be vocal, the typical traits that you think a leader would be?
No, I don't think that's true, and we do a lot of discussion in our program about extroverts versus introverts, and the sort of outgoing personality versus the quieter. And there's been a fair bit of research done in those cases as well. And it really, I personally don't feel it really makes that much of a difference. It's just how you learn to manage your strong personality points or use your strong personality features in different situations. So it's about adaptability, not whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. It's about how well you can adapt to situations, to a crisis, to other individuals, to your clients.
What about gender? What role does this play in all of this discussion? Obviously, still a glass ceiling there, still more men in the boardroom than there are women. How is that changing, and how does your course address that, or your program address that in any way?
Interesting that you mentioned that, because we do have a Future Ready Leadership for Women program launching next week. And the reason that we are launching it, the reason that we've gone to development stage on that, is because of those differences and because of a number of local studies even that have been taken upon and researched lately that shows exactly what you said. Not as many women in the boardroom, et cetera, et cetera. There is a difference. There's a difference in how men versus women lead. There's a difference in how men versus women network even. And
give us some examples of both those.
I think in terms of, and it's really hard because it's never cut and dry.
No, I've had great leaders, both men and women. I've had poor leaders, both men and women.
Exactly. So it really is kind of hard to really define, because there's so many personal situations, like you said, that you can say one, for both sides. But generally, I think women still are a little less assertive or aggressive in the workplace, maybe a little less confident. And now all my, female friends are going to be mad at me for saying that, but I think that's still true. I still think there's difference in the opportunities that are given to men versus women in the workplace as well. So, this program that we're running starting next week is really, to talk about those things and say, so how do we help? How do we help develop strength in both our female leaders and our male leaders? Because at the end of the day, it's all about working together.
What about men's perspective of women leaders? Is that changing? Because again, we the old boys club thing, is that pendulum swinging back?
I think it is. I think it depends on the industry, and I think it's swinging a little slower in some industries than others. But again, it's very subjective to the people you work with, the people you work for. And I mean, I was lucky. I had a very long career at Bell Canada, and I was very fortunate that I didn't see any of that. So, but I know it does still exist in some businesses, and it's just a matter of, again, from a woman's perspective, ensuring that you've got the confidence, that you've got the skills, you've got the knowledge, and go for it. And when, if men are leading, and it's about having an open mind, and when you're doing recruitment, when you're doing selection of leadership, look at all of that. Look at all of the diversity. It's not just men, women. It's culture, it's language, it's all those different areas of diversity that we see. And you really have to look at all of those different things and say, who's the right leader for this position? Who's the right leader for my team or for my organization?
Audie McCarthy has been with us, the president and CEO of Mohawk College's Enterprise, and of course, talking about what it takes to be a great leader and training those to be such. Audie, thanks very much for the time and insight. Much appreciated.
Thank you.